Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for the Amazing Race 36 following episode 3, and this was another pretty interesting episode. Again, different location, different results, and again, a pretty interesting downfall here, but we'll get to that soon enough. But we have 11 teams to talk about, and that's wasting any more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 11, we have the boots from this week, and here we have Anthony and Bailey, who end up having a pretty disastrous leg here. We're coming into it, they talk about how they need to slow down and how they need to think more, and there's a fine line between that and falling behind, only for them to very quickly fall behind in pretty disastrous fashion, where they end up wasting a whole bunch of time on the detour, and they end up switching 3 times, which is pretty ridiculous there. Obviously, they fall to last place, and they aren't really able to recover afterwards. While they are able to kind of make up some time during the roadblock, really they were pretty doomed by that point, considering how much time they lost on the detour. So again, I feel like it was pretty expected for them to go home here, and they were a pretty inconsistent team, obviously, considering how bad they did this leg. Though obviously they did fine enough on the first 2 legs to where I didn't have them that low in the power ranking, but they are now out of the race to where they're here at number 11. And with that, there are 10 teams left in the race to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the race based off their edit and current race position. By number 10, the team that I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is Michelle and Shawn. And I feel like at this point, they're pretty bad racers, where despite them having this solid first leg, as I talked about earlier, I think that was kind of a fluky situation where they really just got lucky in getting to the pit stop earlier, where ever since then, they've been pretty rocky, where they came in second to last in the previous leg. And despite them having this confessional early on about how comebacks are their thing and that they're going to come back, they end up getting second to last again. And this was another pretty bad leg for them, where while they are able to get out of last place initially, largely due to Anthony Bailey doing so bad on the detour, really they're just in the back of the pack the rest of the time, and they aren't really able to gain much traction. And I feel like at this point, they're pretty unlikely to win to where they're here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and we have another team that's kind of been riding the back of the pack for a lot of it, but we do have Kishori and Karishma. And again, they're another team that is kind of mediocre here. Now they do end up improving upon their place in last time, where they were 10th place coming into the leg. They come out of it in 8th place. And they actually do pretty alright on the detour, despite them being vegetarian and having never cooked beef before, which is pretty funny there. But again, they're another team that I don't really have that much faith in to actually win the race, and they're kind of just in the back of the pack right now. So because of that, they're here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and this team had a pretty rocky leg, all things considered, and here we have Angie and Danny. And again, this was another pretty rough leg for them, where they did come into it in an okay spot, coming in 6th place, but they end up falling behind over the course of the leg, where they end up struggling a lot getting to the detour due to their water taxi breaking down, and they end up falling all the way to 9th place. And even beyond that, you had them struggling on the roadblock, where Angie had a lot of trouble with picking the beans. And again, it was just a rough leg for them, all things considered, even though I would say they got a bit unlucky by the taxi breaking down. But I also feel like they are a pretty inconsistent team as well, and I feel like this will be a tough spot to see them recover from. And I feel like with them having a lower placement, I did have to lead them here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have a team that has done all right across the race, but I feel like this show hasn't really highlighted them as much as I would like. And here we have Yvonne and Melissa. And again, if we are just looking at their track record, they have done all right, where again, they got 5th place coming into this leg, and they did kind of fall behind at the end of the detour, falling to 7th place, but they were able to recover to 6th by the end of it, being part of that big scramble. So again, they're not doing that bad across the race, but aside from that, I feel like their edit in this episode was mostly unremarkable, doesn't really have too much to it, which is a big reason why I had to leave them behind at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have a team kind of similar to Yvonne and Melissa, though I feel like they could have some more upside, and here we have Sunny and Bizzy. Now, I think the big thing to talk about with them in this episode is they do get a bit of a storyline with the fact that one of them just lost their grandmother the previous night, which is obviously a pretty big part of their story in this episode. And they do all right across the leg, not as good as Yvonne and Melissa, where they are 9th place coming into the leg and are even able to get it to 5th place at the start of the roadblock, but do eventually fall back to 7th place. So again, this leg isn't that bad for them, and I could see a world where this grandma storyline could lead to something bigger, though it could just as easily be a pretty circumstantial thing. So again, I'm not really sure what to make of them at this point, which is why they're here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and this team has made a bit of a comeback in recent weeks, and here we have Amber and Vinnie. And they have been getting a pretty big edit on the show. I think that's definitely one of the big pros to their prospects, at least up to this point. And they have been getting better over the course of the race here. Now, this leg was pretty interesting for them considering they were in the middle of the pack for a lot of this leg, getting up to 6th place by the end of the detour. But we do see Vinnie really come alive during the roadblock, and he does get propped up for this quite a bit, where he's able to work quickly during the roadblock, getting up to 2nd place, and they are able to pull out a 2nd place finish there. So kind of crazy how they went from being second to last in leg 1 to now being 2nd place at the end of this leg. So again, pretty good there. And I feel like with their big edit, I feel like they're probably going to be in it for a while. Though at the same time, I do question how consistent they'll truly be by the end of it, to where I do have them here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we actually had the same top 4 as last week, and it's just a matter of ordering them. But at number 4, I did decide to go with Derek and Shelisa, sort of the same spot as I had them last week. And they did get some content here where early on they talk about how they want to be here to represent cancer survivors and retirees, and that this is going to be one of their great memories. And that was solid content for them. And I feel like they do pretty well over the course of the leg, where they are able to pull out a 3rd place finish by the end of it. Now, yes, they were the 4th team to finish the roadblock, but they are able to benefit from finding Phil before the rest of the teams in that whole pile. So again, that's good on them there. And I feel like they're still like a pretty consistent team over the course of the season. But I do feel like the top 3 teams have a bit more to offer from an edit perspective and even from a race perspective, which is why I had them here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I did want to put this team a little bit higher, though at the end of the day, their placement didn't really improve that much, but we do have Juan and Shane. And they do manage to retain their placement from last week, where they were 4th place coming into it. They're 4th place at the end of this leg, which is pretty good. We also get some decent content about how they were born in Colombia and how they are proud to represent their heritage. And all that's pretty good content there. Mind you, some of it might be circumstantial, but I still feel like they're pretty big characters on the season, which is a big thing keeping them this high in the ranking, despite the fact that Derek and Shelisa have been outplaying them up to this point in the actual race. But still, I feel like my view of them hasn't really changed. I feel like they're still pretty big racers, which is a big reason I had them here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we have the same top 2 as last week, in the same order as I had them in last week, but we do have Rod and Leticia here at number 2. And they did technically have a fall from grace, where they were 1st place coming into it, they're 5th place by the end of it, though at the same time I don't really fault them too much for their 5th place finish, considering they were the 3rd team to finish the roadblock, and they obviously fell behind to Amber and Vinnie finishing the roadblock way ahead of them, and in general just falling behind due to them not flying Phil in time when there were other teams right behind them. So again, they're still in the top of the pack in my eyes, and I feel like their placement here isn't really indicative of how they'll do moving forward. And I still think they are one of the bigger characters on the season, to where it wouldn't shock me if they continue to do well moving forward. But I feel like the number 1 team has outperformed them from a race perspective, which is why I had them here at number 2. And now at number 1, the team that I believe is the most likely to win the Amazing Race 36 at this point is still Ricky and Cesar. And again, I think a lot of it just comes down to their performance here, where they are the most consistent team up to this point. They have the highest average placement, with 2 2nd place finishes and a 1st place finish, winning their 1st leg of the season, which is pretty good. And they got their follow-up to their storyline from the last episode, where they talked about how they want to be in 1st. They talked about at the beginning of the episode how they're resourceful, they can run it with anything, and that they'll be able to come in 1st there. And they are able to follow up on that. They are able to get through a lot of the leg without too much difficulty, and they are able to win pretty handily, which I feel like is pretty impressive there. I feel like not much has really changed from them compared to last week. I feel like they're still pretty consistent racers, and that's a big reason I had them here at number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so you can forward to that. I'm covering other shows such as Survivor 46 and Big Brother Canada 12, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I'm on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.